off we go with the real start. Okay, everybody, we're gonna do our old uh, Russia story, and I'm going to uh, fix the screen, and I'm going to get the big slide up, and here we go. So when we last ended, Vladimir had built this beautiful church in um, Kiev. And sure enough, in Novgorod, they said, hey, we've got a Kiev dynasty going here. Let's build this beautiful church. So Yaroslav, his son, built that church. Now, this is Our Lady of Kazan Russian Orthodox Cathedral. Guess what city it's in?
San Francisco.
There's a clue. Aiko, you've seen it.
San Francisco.
Go.
Nope.
No. Hmm.
Havana.
It's in Havana. What the heck is a Russian Orthodox church doing in Havana? Putin. Putin. I always want to bring my talks and relate them to the present. It's Putin, and he uses religion. We talked about it last week, and I thought I'd throw this in and just remind you how he used religion to try to get the Ukraine back. In particular, claiming Kiev was Russian. Actually, Moscow is Kievan if you look at it strictly historically, because Kiev was established really as a major city 500 years before Moscow was. And of course, we played the same political game too. So with the split with the Ukraine, and I hope by the end of the lecture you'll understand the split. Where was the split between Russia and the Ukraine historically? And I hope at the end of the lecture, whether it's today or next week, you'll understand that. So here is Kiev in Russia over here on the left. Vladimir sets up his kingdom, and they start stretching out. And off they go. Here's Novgorod. This is where the Vikings originally came, but Novgorod wasn't the center of a major civilization. It was Kiev, because it was closer to Constantinople. Right? They go down the Dnieper and the Black Sea, and how important the Black Sea is. One thing I want to point out, though, is Crimea. Now, last week we looked at Vladimir, and that he was baptized right here on the Black Sea. And so that makes Crimea a big part of the Russian mythology. But it wasn't Kievan. It was, look at the color, it was Byzantine. It was Constantinople. This belonged to Constantinople and later the Ottomans. Russia and Kiev never possessed the Crimea outright until you get to the Greats, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. And even then, it took them a long time. So the Crimea, and then of course, there's a big war, the Crimean War, that's fought in 1854 between Turkey and Britain and on one side and Russia on the other, because they wanted to take it away from the Ottomans, who inherited it from Byzantium. So Crimea, always contentious, and even today in the news big time. So Crimea, as the Kievans expand. But then look at this later map. By this time, you're getting the Muslim caliphate in Baghdad, the Abbasids. But look, Crimea still belongs to the Byzantine Empire and will be taken over by the Ottomans, and the Tatars will be there. You may not remember, but when the Russians reoccupied, the Tatars resisted. They wanted to stay with independent Ukraine. They did not want to be under the Russians. And the Russian history of conquering the steppes left some scars. You see the Khazars, we talked about them last week. Linda had a friend whose family actually came from the Khazars, and the Jewish connection resonated with them. They're still lingering. But here's the story. And how long is this going to last? How long is Kiev and Russia going to last? Only a couple of centuries, folks, because they start fighting with each other. But they've spread out. Here's Novgorod. Where's Moscow? Moscow is nowhere. Moscow is nothing. And it's if anything, a little village in the swamps of northern Russia. But they start squabbling. Finally, Yaroslav the Wise, he dies somewhere around the end of the century, and he is not so wise. He's got 5 sons, and he splits it all up between the 5 sons. And again, Moscow's not on the map. They disintegrate over really a century and a half. They've disintegrated into little fiefdoms headed by warlords. Now, warlords come with many different names, and it's always confusing, right? They're nobles. They're not nobles. They're aristocrats. They're not high-toned aristocrats. What underlies their power is violence. And we just have to keep that clear as we look at world history. You can give them different names, but it's based on violence. A police force, if you will. And in Russia, they're called boyars. So you'll hear later on the Tsar feuding with the boyars. It's the same problem as Henry VIII feuding with the so-called nobles of England. The same thing. One's warlord of all warlords, one master chieftain trying to impose his will. And that's what the boyars are. And they're descendants of Vikings. They identify as descendants of Vikings. And they have that Viking will to power. Boyars, you'll hear more about them when we return to Russia after 1500. So here's an interesting statement. I'll give you a second to read it. So we're all very familiar with English history. And to find a parallel to English history, oh, so yeah, the Normans were basically Vikings, and they came into England and they set up a culture and a civilization. So Juan Jose, when you hear this, a civilization, and it turns out the Vikings were easily domesticated. We're going to have an example in just a few minutes of somebody who doesn't get so easily domesticated. And that's the Mongols. Just a few more minutes. So a little summary of what we've seen. Kiev, first major city, traded with Constantinople because of the river systems of northern Russia. And Kiev became the center of Byzantine Christianity, Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. They called it Russian Orthodox before Moscow's even on the map. There is no Moscow. There is no Moscow. Okay, so the Mongols, they come in a couple of waves. The first wave doesn't get to Kiev. The second wave does in 1240. This slide does not include the question that we had last week about the Teutonic Knights. So I'm going to again postpone it. I said I'd do it very soon, but I do want to do the Mongols before the Teutonic Knights, and you'll see why. So the Teutonic Knights are going to come over. They've been to the Holy Land. They've been on the Crusades. They come up through Prussia, and they they expand, they Christianize the Baltic countries, and they decide to do the same thing in Novgorod. Oh, this worked out well with the Baltic countries. Let's just go right on over. And there is an epic battle where the Slavs draw a line. No, you're not coming into Russia. And it's a repeated story of Europeans trying to get into Slavic Russia, and Russia slams the door. I'll just give a spoiler. It's Alexander Nevsky who fights an epic battle, and we're going to return to that, I promise you. But he's just the first Russian to slam the door. The Russians slam the door on Napoleon when there is a Moscow, and they slam the door on the Germans. And the Moscow Russians and the Germans, they go back and forth over this territory for a long time. So the door sometimes gets pushed open briefly, as Hitler did, and controlled it for years of terror. Napoleon didn't stay that long. So we're coming back, but we've got to do the South and the East, and what happened to Kievan Russian then. And here's what happened. I'm going to let this run a few times. Mongolia, northern to the south. Then they set up administrative areas. Now, when we come back this next time, pay attention to the yellow area. Okay, Mongols spread out, reach their APAC, almost into Europe, into Hungary. So watch the Black Sea. So the Black Sea's right here. I'm going to keep running this for a minute. I want you to get a feel for this. There's the Black Sea. And in they come. Here's the Crimea down here. Boom, they finally get Kiev. They get Hungary. Okay, so Hungary's always been a vital player. And Hungary has always split the northern Slavs from the southern Slavs. And so that's important to realize and know. And so Hungary's right here. And this is as far as the Mongols get in Europe. They knock at the door of Vienna, but they never go in. And the Ottoman Turks never get in. Now pay attention to the Baltic area. The Teutonic Knights are up there. They're saying, "Hey, we want that Nevsky. We're going to get him." Nevsky repels them, and the Mongols come in and say, "Okay, you did a pretty good job here, Teutonic Knights, but we're the new guys in charge." All right, the yellow area that you're going to see evolve is the area of the Golden Horde. The yellow areas, the Golden Horde. Remember that name. Yellow area, Golden Horde. And these are the more enduring.
John, the spelling of horde, H-O-R-D-E?
H-O-R-D-E. And these are the enduring administrative areas that are going to continue for a couple of hundred years. But it's not like they impose Mongolian civilization, Juan Jose. It's not a civilization. It's a tribute area, a tax area. It's a protection racket. We're not giving you culture. We're promising not to break your window if you pay us a certain amount of money, just like in the inner cities, the protection rackets of hoodlums and gangs. And the Golden Horde. So we'll come back to that. And I'll let it run one more time with the years down here. So you just 206, 219, 223, 227, 237, 59, 79, 94. I'll read off those numbers so you can watch. It's always 12. And now it's going to be 06, 19, 23, 27, 37, 59, 79, 94. Okay, so all out throughout the 1200s. Okay, that'll give you a little sense of what the Mongols do and how can they possibly do it. The horse. It's the horse that allows them to do it. The culture of the horse. The Mongolians took the horse and did more with the horse than anybody had ever done in history and has ever done since. And so this is a great kid's book, and it gives you the history of the horse. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's start 100,000 years ago. There were wild horses all throughout the New World and the Old World. Wild horses. Somewhere around 20,000 years ago, humans made it to the New World. In the Old World, they had evolved alongside the horse. And the horse, evolving with humans, realized how dangerous humans were. We are the killer apes. So horses in the Old World said, be wary. I've noticed that these killer apes are developing tools. Stay away from them. So they were wild horses. 20,000 years ago, these killer apes came across the Bering Straits while the sea levels were still low in the Ice Age. And they came into this world and they said, huh, there are horses here too. But the horses in the new world were different than the horses in the old world. They had not evolved alongside humans. They had no fear of humans. So what happened to them? They got eaten. They got eaten. They got killed and eaten. And they weren't the only ones. The legends of the megafauna, a lot of the fauna in the New World were much bigger than in the Old World for some reason. And they all got hunted to extinction, including the woolly mammoth. By the way, Juan Jose, the first big dig in America in the early years of American archaeology was right near where you're going to be going, and you'll have an opportunity to go to Big Lick and see where these bones were buried. And the guy that was the most interested in these megafauna from the days of yore was Thomas Jefferson, who did not believe that animals could go to extinction. He believed that if God put an animal on earth, they'd stay here forever. But these discoveries that there were mammoths in the New World and they were no longer here, was proof positive that animals could go extinct. He still didn't believe it, and he sent Lewis and Clark to find mammoths. And it's just an interesting sidelight, all laid out in the sixth extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, a great book on the environment. And on the sixth extinction is called the Anthropocene extinction, which means man-made extinctions. And that's us. And the horse in the New World was a man-made extinction by the killer apes. But now let's go back to the old world and human beings dealing with wild horses. So they were exotic, right? Cavemen put pictures of them on the walls. They were fast. They were hard to catch. But once you caught them, they were good eating. They were good eating. And so that's all they did was hunt and eat them just like all the other animals until about 4,000 years ago, when they figured out how to domesticate them and herd them and then eat them. Then 4,000 that was 6,000 years ago, excuse me, 6,000 years ago. 4,000 years ago, they figured out how to use them for transportation. But they didn't start with the horse. The Mongols were the first people to get on any other mammal back, and it wasn't the horse, it was the reindeer. And so our grandkids found this very amusing, very amusing. This is where the Mongols learned ridership. This was their training wheels for horses. Reindeers were less wild. But then finally, they figured out, hey, if we could ride the back of a reindeer, maybe we can ride the back of a horse. So the Mongols figured that out too. In other places, before they rode on the back of the horse, Irene's coming in. Hello, Irene. We're right in the middle of the history of the horse. before they dared get on the back of a horse, they'd hitch up a horse to a vehicle. And they do that first. And then somebody said, hey, the Mongols are riding the back, or maybe even the Mongols came roaring down and raided them. And then they said, well, if the Mongols can ride them on their backs, maybe we can too. But nobody can ride a horse like the Mongols can. They're out on the plains. They don't have anything else to do. They are nomads. They have not followed the usual path of being herding nomad people and then developing agriculture. They never developed agriculture because the steppes were not suitable for agriculture for many reasons. So they stuck with herding, and they've been riding these horses now for 4,000 years. And they've learned to do all kinds of things on horses. It's said they could even swing down over the side and shoot an arrow under the horse. And I'll show you something in just a minute. Being on horses and living on the grasslands, you don't need roads. The grasslands, a road is wherever you want to go. And you want to pick up a flower, no problem. You want to pick up, somebody drop something, you can go and pick it up. You can imagine that some warrior might have been able to swing under there and shoot an arrow. Horsemen, there's never been anything like the Mongols. And finally, they said, you know what, we could do some raiding with this. And let's take some weapons. We've got these spears, and we can shoot forwards and backwards. We can set up a long line across. So it's hard for the people we're attacking to cover the full breadth of our attack. Snow, no problem. And then they came up with tactics, cavalry tactics.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Yes.
Did the Mongols who were doing all this raiding, did they have women and children with them or no?
They did. And being, and I'll show you pictures in just a second. Being a nomadic tribe, by the way, and we talked about this when I did my lecture over women over 4,000 years, from 3,500 up to 500 CE. We talked about how going to agriculture was a demotion for women for many different reasons I won't go into again, but it's in that lecture, which is also in the video collection. Often the nomadic tribes were matrilineal. And that's what we discovered when we went to live on the Navajo reservation, that the Navajos were nomads, and they were matrilineal. Wealth and legacy went through the women's side. Once agriculture starts, patrimony takes off. And I won't go into detail on that, but women had more power and were more crucial in the nomadic society. And they were mobile. I'll show you a slide in just a second about how mobile they were. Aiko, could you give me my iPad? I can't keep track of the time. So tactics. We won't go into all the details, but they took cavalry tactics to a new level. They pretended to retreat. They lured people into traps. They were very tricky. They did all kinds of stuff on a horse that nobody'd ever done before. And here's the thing. If you want to retreat, you can't. In the, thank you. In, before the Mongols, before the cavalry, if you wanted to surrender, you could. Or you could at least retreat. Oh, they'll stop tonight and camp, and then we'll make our retreat. No, the Mongols never stopped. They were extremely mobile. They, as you'll see, they can carry their supplies long distances. They're unrelenting, and you can't retreat. You either have to surrender or be killed. And so it didn't take long. These are the first two stages of Mongol expansion. This is their capital, Karakorum. And first stage, Genghis Khan. Second stage, Genghis Khan. And then there's going to be more. But look, in the first two stages, Kiev is not affected. They get the Crimea and Hungary before they get Kiev. But Kiev's days are numbered. Here you go, Linda. This is how mobile they are. They've got oxen. They can transport their yurts long distance. Sure, a lot of this is going to be supplies for troops, but some families are at least of the leaders are going to be able to come along. Finally, there's emerges one leader of all these tribes. These little chieftains have been squabbling and raiding each other and stealing each other's wives and supplies and food for a long time. But finally, one leader emerges for the first time, organizing all the Mongol chieftains into one united power. And here he is. He finally makes it the King of Kings in 1206. And once he unites the Mongols, and by the way, it took him a long time. He's in his 50s before he starts devastating the rest of the world. He's been compared, he's not Alexander the Great, who inherits a kingdom from his father, Philip, and at the age of 19 is off to see the world. This guy had a very challenging childhood, which I'll show you in just a second. And it took him a long time to unite the Mongols. So he's been compared more to Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar took him a long time to go up and conquer Gaul and gain a military reputation. For him to come back and cross the Rubicon against the warning of all the politicians in Rome, stay in the north, Julius, you're a general, don't come back here. So it took him a while, and he finally comes back to Rome and becomes a tyrant. Genghis has a similar story. As a military leader, it took him a long time to consolidate power too, not like Alexander the Great, for instance. So we know a lot about Genghis Khan and his history, because after his great success, they had a great assembly and they decided we've got to write all this down. And he had taught some of his most intelligent um, uh, uh, followers a method of writing, and they had learned it. They didn't know it at the beginning of all this. And they wrote down the secret history of the Mongols decades, and it was done decades after the Great Conquest. So we know a lot of, there are contemporaneous things, which is different than, say, Muhammad. Um, uh, the Quran wasn't written down for a century after, at least in the detail, it is today for a century. And there are some people that question whether Muhammad even exists. Obviously, they lay low so as not to get a fatwa, although there have been people who've received fatwas for even daring to suggest that. It's not like Christianity was similar in that Paul was writing a lot of stuff down within a couple of decades after the crucifixion. So we got some good contemporary history. We know he had red hair, and some of this is shows the mixture on the steppes. There had been a lot of history, and so we remember this famous picture of this girl who has green eyes. How did Indo-European green eyes get into this Afghani? So we see red hair and green eyes, just showing genetically we're all mixed. We know from red hair and green eyes, but now with DNA, it's being laid out more and more every day. We're learning new things. So how did
John, you when you said the man had red hair, that was Genghis Khan?
Genghis Khan was said to have red hair? Who knows what Genghis Khan looks like, right? For sure. But this is from the Chronicles. And Genghis Khan, he had a rough childhood, right? I told you it took him decades to gain power. His father was assassinated, and he was treated as a prisoner. He had to walk around with his head in a board for years, because he was perceived as being dangerous, the son of a chieftain who'd been assassinated. This is from a dramatization of Genghis Khan's life. His mother had famously told him, unity is the key, son. If you can get a few of your brothers united, then that's good. And if you can get a few of your friends and their clans united, you'll be strong. And she gave each one of her 5 sons an arrow. And she said, now break it. And they all could break it. And then she took out a batch of arrows like this, bound together, and said, now break it. And none of them could break it. And her point was, in unity, there's strength. I've seen this before. This is the same principle of taking rods and putting together. In Latin, they were called fasci. You put many fasci together and you've got unity, and you've got fascism. So it's interesting how you hear echoes throughout history. This is a Mongol folk tale, and this is a fascist symbol. So let's just look at the pre-Mongol days. This map is pretty small. The point is they're all tiny, little independent countries, we've been talking mostly about the Russians, Lithuanians, Poles. They're all over here. The 1200, this is in more detail. By then already the Kievan area, a dynasty has started to splinter into the, remember Yaroslav the Wise unwisely split his kingdom up. So they're all split. You have this desperate group of people just sitting there enjoying their civilization, and out comes the Mongols, and they start spreading like crazy. And this gives the dates. They go to China first, and they set up administration in northern China. This is the siege of Beijing, 1213. And the Chinese are easily defeated, and it's 12 o'clock. So I'm gonna respect that some of us have to go, even though we got a late start. This is not a bad place to stop with the first wave of China. And for some reason, Juan Jose's coming in just as we finish.
Daylight savings time.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Goodbye, everybody. This is Irene. Goodbye. Thank you.